Hi everyone, I'm Julia with the Berkeley Judicial Institute, back with another installment of Judges in the Community. Today we're joined by Judge Sara Grewing, Judge Maria Mitchell, and Judge Nicole Starr, who will be jumping in midway and here to share the inspiring work they have done, starting a women's group for incarcerated women, now moving these efforts out into the community for those who have been involved with the legal system. Good morning, judges. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. I can't wait to dive into your journey and insights. But just to start out, maybe starting with Judge Grewing, would you mind briefly sharing a little bit more about who you are, where you sit, and your personal judicial history?
Sure. So my name is Sara Grewing. I am the chief judge here in Ramsey County, which is the second judicial district here in Minnesota. I've been a judge for just over 10 years. Judge Starr, whom you'll meet in a few minutes, and I were appointed on the same day. Um, Before I was a judge, I mostly worked in public interest law and sort of public life. I began my career as a law clerk and eventually an assistant Hennepin County attorney over in Minneapolis. After that, I briefly worked in private practice, doing some government relations work representing cities in greater Minnesota. Following that, I returned to work for the Hennepin County attorney as she ran for the United States Senate. Her name is Amy Klobuchar, and so I was her political director and eventually her state director in her Senate office here in Minnesota. Following that, I served as the mayor's chief of staff here in St. Paul. Then I was the St. Paul City Attorney, and the St. Paul City Attorney is the chief prosecutor for all misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors that happen within the boundaries of St. Paul. We also provided legal support and litigation support for all of the 3,000 employees who work for the city of St. Paul. So, building big things. We have a big amateur baseball stadium. We had a big rail project go through while I was in the city attorney's office. And then we also sort of that day-to-day legal support for our police and fire department, our water department, parks and recreation, that sort of thing. I was appointed by Mark Dayton to the bench in late December of 2014 and started in 2015. And I've served in every division of our offices. I've served as a family court judge, a criminal judge, and a civil judge, and I've been serving as the chief judge here in Ramsey County for just about the last year.
I'm Judge Maria Mitchell, and I'm originally from the Twin Cities, and my family was part of what we call the historic Rondo community, which was the our version of the Black neighborhood where the freeway went through for disruption, and that was one of the things that that history of activism and things to progress civil rights as part of my family background. But I spent the beginning of my career, I started out in Tennessee working for a small firm, and then I worked for legal aid in New York, and I practiced family law there and a little bit of criminal law for legal aid. And then I transitioned here to Minnesota, where I clerked for a judge as a transition, Judge Tanya Bransford. And from there, I was a public defender for about a little over 10 years. And as a public defender, I represented clients on everything from misdemeanor public urination up to first-degree murder. So then after that, I spent a little time in the prosecutor's office as a child protection attorney representing the county in child protection matters, as well as I worked in the treatment courts as the county prosecutor who was responsible for all of the community courts, which would be drug court, which is adult substance abuse court, as well as DWI court, veterans court, and mental health court. So all the different community courts. Then I transitioned to be the director of the juvenile division in Ramsey County Attorney's Office, where I initiated the collaborative review team under the direction of John Choi, who is the county attorney. It was his idea, but I was selected to implement it, where we diverted as many juveniles as possible from the judicial process into the restorative justice process. And right now I'm assigned to the criminal division and mainly responsible for community offenses, misdemeanors, and I do some felonies. I was appointed by Governor Walz, and I've been a judge for about 3 years.
Great. Thank you so much for your amazing introductions. It is such an honor to speak to both of you. And now diving straight into the core of our conversation today, what project are you here to share with us and where did it all begin?
Judge Mitchell, do you want me to go first?
That would
All
be
right.
great since
Okay.
you were first on the project.
So Judge Starr, whom you'll meet in a few minutes, and I began sort of the early stages of this project before the pandemic. We have a colleague. His name is Judge George Stevenson, who had been working with men in the community who had some sort of justice involvement for upwards of 20 years. And he sort of did it on his own and without a lot of support, but he was just meeting with men every other week to talk about the challenges that they were facing. And he would occasionally go to our workhouse, which is a place where people are incarcerated for less than a year, a shorter period of time, and talk to the women who were there about the work that he was doing. And they would always say, well, how come you don't have anything for us? So I think Judge Starr and I had been on the bench for about 6 months when Judge Stevenson said, hey, you have to come up with something for women. It's time. We have to. This is not okay that we have a resource for men and we don't have sort of a commensurate option for women. And so we started by going into our workhouse, our short-term correctional facility, in part because it seemed both really important to get women at a really critical point to talk about how the system could serve them better, the challenges they were facing, things like that. And there were less of a logistical challenge. I mean, we had a great partnership with the workhouse, and a woman named Liz Reitz was running it at the time. And so she was very welcoming in terms of our ability to come in. Also, when you serve women, there often are a lot of collateral pieces that that was hard for us to kind of ramp up to. Like, we always have to have childcare. We really need to feed them. We need to make it worth their time and effort to come to us in the community. And so we started at the workhouse just because we didn't have all those pieces in place yet. Then during the pandemic, they had to shut down. So Judge Starr and I went every other Friday night to the workhouse to meet with the women who were there and got just extraordinary information, got really good ideas about how we could improve the criminal justice system, how the things that we thought might be really good policies were really kind of working their way through and impacting women and their families. And so that was extremely helpful. And then
And I think I joined you a couple times at the workhouse before I
exactly.
became a judge, but
Right. And so like so then they kind of kicked all the volunteers out during the pandemic. So we couldn't come in. And then I think when we were able to go back in, that's when you joined us, right, Judge
oh,
Mitchell?
okay.
Yeah. So I think sort of just at the tail end of the pandemic, when they were starting to let volunteers come in, then Judge Mitchell started joining us. She wasn't a judge then, but she was a prosecutor then. She started joining us and going inside the workhouse. The reality is, for better or for worse, the pandemic gave us a lot of data about how well women did on electronic home monitoring and work release. And so there were just a lot fewer women at the workhouse. And so that was part of the impetus, is that we could see, hey, they really didn't need to do 30 days here. They could do this at home and continue to be present for their families and access treatment a lot easier, that sort of thing. So that's when, and I think actually, Judge Mitchell, were the women in the workhouse the first people you told that you had been appointed? It was this
Yeah,
really cool moment that I'll always remember, that like they were the first people to be in the know that Judge Mitchell had gotten the judgeship. And so it was a super fun place. But really weren't that many women left to serve in the workhouse. And so that was sort of the last thing that kind of pushed us out into the community to find space, to find food, to find resources that we could help women in the community. And that's when we started working with Ramsey County Probation. And maybe I wonder, Judge Mitchell, should I turn it over to you to talk about the sort of in the community work and how that got started?
so originally we were, like she said, we were at the workhouse and we thought, well, we'll work with the women at the workhouse, but then we need a continuum of care on the outside. So then we tried to do it like alternating weeks. So 1 week we'd be at the workhouse and 1 week in the community. But that was kind of confusing for everyone, including us, and because then the women had to remember which week we were on, and also not everyone who was at the workhouse was coming in the community. We were getting probationers who were not at the workhouse coming to us. And so ultimately, we decided to transition to just the community because that's where people need actually the most support. It didn't seem to make that much of a difference that we were starting the relationship in custody and transitioning to out of custody, because also Ramsey County was housing people from other counties at the time, and so they may not come out and come to Ramsey County. And once we got out into the community, though, we started with more of us than people visiting us. So it was Judge Grewing, I, a public defender, Emma, and a prosecutor, which ended up being Mutiat. And we were in the community, and I was the prosecutor at first, and then it transitioned to Mutiat. But we were in the community, and there were all of us, and like 2 or 3 women came, and they were like, okay, I'm surrounded by judges and lawyers, and what is this? A little bit intimidating, but then once they met us, they will tell you that it all went away, and it wasn't so intimidating. It was just that we were so happy that they came, and they would tell their friends, and they would tell their friends, and we started to grow. And Judge Grewing and Judge Starr, who is present now, selected the community curriculum,
No,
which
Judge,
is yes, so seeking safety in the community, and that was a big draw to women, because a lot of our women at one time during our session, we were like talking about different types of abuse, and we had a women's shelter person there from the domestic abuse shelter, and one of the clients, or not clients, I'd say one of our group members said, like when you're trafficked, and like everybody in the group was like, yeah. And we were like, oh, okay. So seeking safety, the name of the curriculum, was really attractive to the women, because most of our women who have been offenders have also been victims. And I'll let Judge Starr introduce herself.
Hi. I'm sorry I am late, but I hope that this lovely little animal makes up for it. I'm Nicole Starr, and I've been a judge here in Ramsey County for 10 years. I'm currently in our Juvenile and Family Justice Division.
You were formerly the head of criminal too, weren't you?
I was and focused on treatment courts while I was in criminal. And I guess as if part of our introduction is how we ended up being interested in this, certainly being in treatment courts and seeing the redemptive power of having people in positions of power be engaged in people's lives in authentic ways was really a driving force. Plus, my mentor judge, and I think a lot of our mentor judges, Judge Stevenson was like, go out and do this. Like, let's make this happen.
And one thing I will say too that I noticed, just kind of being a newcomer to Ramsey County, was that I think when Judge Stevenson saw Judge Grewing and Judge Starr, he immediately saw people who could do this work. There were other women judges before them, but there was something particularly engaging about Judge Starr having been a former public defender, and Judge Grewing having worked with a lot of people over the years in different capacities, that made them uniquely suited to do this type of work, because not everyone can do this work, because it really does, it requires you to set aside any type of ego or airs or pretense about who you are, and just meet people where they're at and be part of the group without judgment.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know you guys kind of talked about how this woman group came to be, and that kind of evolution of what it is today. I was wondering, in that process, have there been any roadblocks or inspirations? And Could you tell us a little bit more about how this collaboration has grown into what it is today?
There have been both. So I'll defer to Judge Starr because she's new to us to tell you about the inspirations and the roadblocks.
Well, I don't know if Judge Grewing has already told this story. So we started off, it was Judge Grewing and I started off going to the correctional facility here in Ramsey County, and we would go every Friday or every other Friday and met women while they were incarcerated. And it was it, it was a really interesting time. It was prior to the COVID pandemic and the shutdown of all the facilities. So Judge Grewing and I would go. Some Fridays there would be a lot of women. At least more than one Friday, we were told that Judge Judy was on, and there was microwave popcorn, so we had very few women. Just we can't compete. Um, and at one
And
point,
we even brought pizza at one point because we didn't want to compete with any kind of special programs at the workhouse.
we we really did. I mean, it was wonderful to sit and talk with women. We learned a lot about what was on their minds, what was happening, the lack of programming specifically for women. Um, and I think at one point, one of the people asked us if Judge Grewing and I hung out on the outs. And um, I'm a nerd, so I was kind of like mm. And the outs, I guess, means not at the facility.
Right.
Um, and and would we ever have a group on the outside? And I think that really started, at least Judge Grewing, I think you started thinking about like, well, what could that look like? And before we really got that going, COVID hit, and so everything shut down, and we had a lot of time to plan.
I think one of the challenges that we faced during the group is that we actually got too big. um, we became word of mouth too big. And for the amount of people that are running this non-professional staff, like by that I mean there's no executive director type group. It's a bunch of volunteers, mainly Judge Starr, Judge Grewing, the public defender Emma Koski, and Mutiat Lau, the prosecutor volunteer, and we got up to like 80 women at one point. And we were like, okay. And it was difficult because we were also doing the childcare. Judge Grewing is our childcare specialist. And a lot of the kids have had what in the school setting is labeled as level 4 behavior. And so it was so because they had traumatic experiences basically. And so it was getting to be more than we could manage. Basically, we did, the women still enjoyed coming and they kept coming, but it was a lot of people for the number of volunteers that we had. And so we regrouped and we decided to focus on, because we were getting a lot of people from the sober community, and we decided to focus solely on people who were within the county, either on probation or parole or out of the county, but were on probation and parole in our county. In terms of residency, as well as child protection and commitment court type stuff. But it had to be tied to court. And that did reduce our numbers back to a more manageable 30 to 20 people, 20 to 30 people. So that was one of the big challenges that we had, is we got a little too popular because people really enjoyed the programming and there isn't enough programming. But it was more than we could manage.
Absolutely. I also think another inspiration or measure of success is that we have a lot of like mother-daughter combos, like daughter started coming and then brought her mother, or people bring their friends. And I think being mindful of the size challenges, we don't want to grow too fast again, or sort of find that sweet spot where we can serve, the most number of people as well as we can. But I think that's just a huge marker of success too, is when people say, I brought my I brought my friend from high school who has this, or I brought my mom or whatever. And they keep coming back. And I find that really inspiring too. Even when, we have someone struggling with substance use disorder, oftentimes they will still show up on Wednesday nights and their mom can sort of see them,
Mhm.
even if, things are going awry in other places. If they show up on Wednesday nights, it's good for everybody to just make contact.
I think one of the really inspirational stories, and you can talk about this, Judge Starr, is Felicia. We won't say her last name, but she was, I mean, she really credits the group with a lot of her success.
Yeah, she is somebody. So we don't at this point have people who are court ordered. I think she may have been at a very early stage when we may have had people still being sent by judges or probation as being ordered. People come now because we exist and we actually ask judges not to court order folks to our group. But she came and I think I remember very early on, she had her like DBT papers with her and was excited to show us what she was doing in DBT, and stuck with
Dialectical
us.
behavioral therapy.
And and this was really early when we were just back in the community, so there were probably more judges than participants. And so it was a really intimidating room. And she came in there, and was just really open to talking, being open to having people gently challenge her. We talked about, substance use, we talked about violence, we talked about all sorts of things that were really important to her and other people in the group. And she continued to come back. And what's been fantastic about her is she's gone from somebody who was receiving information to somebody who feels empowered to give that same um, information and direction to others. So she's now somebody who will gently say, well, have you thought about this? Or here's something I did that really worked. Or, don't be so hard on yourself. She's become the leader in the group and is one of the two participants who were early on who now facilitate the group. And both of our participants, I think it's one of the best things that I've seen is other women are like, so you two are the judges? And I think it's a really wonderful moment where women get to see other women who've gone through really hard stuff and be like, so you're the judge. They aren't, but they are seen as the people in power, the leadership. And people look at us and are like, you're the judge of this. Like it's a really wonderful moment to be like, well, we're here to watch and learn from Felicia and from our other member leaders. We provide a lot of the infrastructure. We certainly do provide the whatever the prestige is of being judges, but we really do try to step back and say, you have um, leadership that has come through this program. We really want you to hear what they have to say. It's much more interesting than what we can say, and much more authentic. And um, you we're just we're cheerleaders here to help support others.
Judge Grewing, did you want to talk about like that transition from to we just kind of show up every week to like a more of a leadership team?
Um, Say more. I'm not sure I understand.
How we did develop the participants to be, the participant model led model.
Yeah, and I think, well, you bring it up exactly correctly. I think, and I that's one of our sort of hopes for the future.
Hmm.
And I would say that's been a challenge. This isn't Judge Starr, Judge Mitchell, and my full-time job. And so having this really good thing that could be a really great thing, sometimes we feel like there's not there I think all three of us are sometimes concerned about missed opportunities in terms of how we could serve people better. But one of the things I think we are really proud about is that we used to like text each other on Wednesday mornings and say, "Hey, what are we doing tonight? Like, how are we going to fill 90 minutes tonight?" And now we have Sometimes that still happens, but in general, now we have a calendar and we have these two participants, Felicia and Brenda, who keep us on task, who say, hey, we're going to do crafts tonight, or we have a speaker next week, or and we really depend on them and value their wisdom and expertise and, sort of pressure test new ideas. We just changed locations in the community and we really talked it through with the two of them. Like, how do you think this is going to impact people who may have difficulty with transportation? Are there other sort of issues we need to discuss? And they're so smart and so thoughtful about community and how women can and should show up for each other. And so I think then becoming this executive team, so it's the three of us, the prosecutor, the public defender we talked about. We have a representative from probation who assists us, Gail Morkey, and then we have Felicia and Brenda who also sit in and that's kind of I think, am I missing anybody? I think that's the whole executive team, and that's kind of how we make decisions and drive our calendar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think recently the only two people we're missing are Veronica and Lindsay Olson.
Yes.
We recently have had a couple more people join in to help, and it's critical, like that people show up because everyone has good and bad days, and with our profession, and we connect on that level as women with the women, but at the same time, we can sort of fill the gaps for each other as we go through this process. And I'll say one good thing about me wearing my Midwest flannel, it's an example of how we kind of show up in group. We never wear our court clothes to group. We always are. That's why sometimes they're like, oh, you're a judge? Because we show up in our various personal styles to meet everyone as we are as people, as opposed to as we are as a position.
I most recently so I'm a Minnesota Lynx fan, and I most recently wore my Minnesota Lynx hat with a lynx on it. And one of our women runs a free store in an area in St. Paul, and she came the next week and said, I found this hat, this tiger hat, and I thought you should have this from the free store. And I was like, this is awesome. Thank you. And it's just, for all the people who say I've never met a judge or I'm really scared, the only time I've ever had an interaction with a judge was when they were in court. Um, and I remember one of our participants, and this was a long time ago, was like, well, why would they say I'm not amenable to probation? Why would people say some of the things that get said in court? And as much as we think about trying to be trauma informed in court, and have people have trauma informed language, it it doesn't always work. And the amount of pain and hurt that a lot of our women have seen through court systems, like I think being able to talk with real people who are part of those same systems who um, can be in front of somebody and say, I'm sorry that person said that because that wasn't right and it was hurtful, and really try to meet people and say, you know what, I'm a person too, and I really want us to be in community. I don't want it to always be that you're afraid of me or that you think court systems can't serve you too.
Yeah, and I really love your guys' reflection upon the participants and their growth story. I think that really showcases the impact you all make onto the community. I kind of wanted to kind of shift the spotlight onto all three of you, as judges. How would you say that this project has had a personal impact on you, whether that's when you're on the bench or outside as an individual? Yeah, I would love to hear more about, how this project has shaped you as an individual.
So, profoundly, I've been profoundly impacted by the work of the women we serve and the this project as a whole. One really kind of narrow way that people who are listening might relate to. I chaired the bail evaluation work group for the state of Minnesota, and I know a lot of jurisdictions have a bail evaluation. And we have this friend who comes to group, and actually Judge Starr and I met her when she was in the workhouse. She was then committed to prison and she's out now. And so she's coming back to group and we're so excited to have her. And, one of the things when we were speaking just broadly about bail and what that means is she would say, I'd come to court and they would say, look at all the times you didn't show up for court. And she said, those court dates were in Hastings, which is a sort of an outer ring suburb of St. Paul. And she said, I just didn't have a ride. Like I wanted to go to court, but by sort of scoring those against me, like I wasn't intentionally blowing off court, especially at the time. Like she was in a reasonably good place, just couldn't get out to those courthouses. And so one of the things I worked really hard on, sort of having her in my mind, was our bail evaluation no longer scores failure to appear warrants. So we really have a very narrow bail evaluation, but it doesn't include previous failures to appear, because it really, I understand how judges listening to this may think, well, obviously you have to include that, but the data suggests, one, that it measures poverty more than it measures people's unwillingness to come to court, and two, that that there's some bias in the data. So meaning that it doesn't give us, it gives us the same information that if you're currently on probation supervision, if you're working or doing something positive, and if you have a pending case of a gross misdemeanor or higher, those things tell us the same information without all the concerns about failures to appear warrants. So I always had this woman's, I won't say her last name, but I've always had Darla in my mind when I was, working so hard to get the votes to get that to pass, because I think her personal experience really shaped policy for the rest of the state, and her ability to really eloquently and adequately communicate that position has stuck with me for, 8 years, Judge Starr. When did we first meet her? And helped to drive some things that we were able to change.
Yeah, for me, I think it's been mostly the way it shapes me is that, one, it kind of grounds me in the sense that about the consistency of the group. At one time we talked about going every other week. And then we would have people who just show up in crisis or need us and expecting, us there every week. And it just reminds me how fragile everybody's situation is when they come to court. I also believe that in court, this is kind of selfish, but in court, you feel like you're pretty limited in the scope of how you have contact with people that come to court. But when you go to group, it's such a much more meaningful connection with people, in my opinion. And it makes me feel as if I'm kind of on a it's on a continuum of like care sort of thing. Like I see someone in court and all I can do is say like, okay, now you're on probation. Now I'm handing you off to these other people. And I don't know what happens to you, but by going to group, I feel like, okay, now I can hear your story and see how life is working for you and how it progresses. Like it would be a conflict for me to hear somebody or to be on a case of someone in group, but there are people who their situations mirror the people that are in front of you. So it's the same population of people for the most part. And it really connects you to what the experience is of being justice involved in a way that being an attorney for someone and being directed to a specific place and time or set of facts or incident, or being in the county attorney's office and looking at the offense as a whole. But here you get to see the person after they have gone through the justice system or while they're going through it in their daily life. And I think that's an important perspective to have.
I think for me, the it's given me a really good basis to try different things in court. And so right now I'm in child protection um, for most of my calendars. And we have a hearing in child protection. It's the very first hearing that we have when children have been taken from them. And the parents come into the courtroom, and we've had women in our group who have had children and either been part of the child protection system as children or have had their children or families be part of this system. And it's given me a sense of um, how the amount of humanity that I want to bring to the courtroom and said, like, stop, to myself, I've said, well, you know, stop being afraid to try to be more trauma informed because I have to every Wednesday go back to group and sit with women and do a check-in. And I expect honesty from them, and they expect the same from me. And so I've changed that first hearing, so we all sit at the table together. Um, One of the things that I think is important from group is that we have a hot meal every time. It's a chance for us to sit down together and share food. So at these hearings, I bring little fruit snacks and just try to really take the temperature down in our court appearances because especially in child protection, most of the people I see, we're trying to reunite their family and we're trying to engage folks with government services. And if you come in and say, I don't trust the judge and I don't trust the government and everyone's out to get me, which I think is a real valid feeling, then it makes it really hard to work together. And so and the women in our group, I have one of my favorite, not, well, they're all my favorites, but one of the women who is engaged in the child protection system. I mean, we've talked a lot about, just practicing. I'd say to her, well, have you cussed out your social worker today? And she's like, I wanted to, but I thought about it and I didn't do it. And I was like, that is fantastic, or, just I put her on mute and cussed her out and then took it off mute. And I was like, even better. Like, I am so proud of you. And the funny thing with her, and I think about her in my child protection cases, is she was like, I don't believe you when you say that you're proud of me. And I don't believe you when you tell me that I'm doing a good job. And I'm like, no, you are. And you can keep coming back to group. I'm going to keep telling you. And she keeps coming back to group. And on hard days, she's shown up, and all three of us have loved on her and said, look, you're doing good. This is tough, right? And acknowledge like how hard this is, how well you're doing. And, we realize that sometimes we're the only people in women's lives right now who constantly are saying, you're doing great. This is so hard. And I'm really impressed. And just honest, real feedback, true appreciation. Um, and then,
And
for me, it's like, and then how can I bring that into courtrooms when it's appropriate?
it does give you like things to think about in terms of what you say to people and trying to be authentic with someone that you don't know well. We're asked to do that all the time on the bench. Like you've read through everything. Can you imagine going in front of a judge and they've read your psychological profile? Like that doesn't happen if you're not involved in the justice system. Like you actually have privacy rights, and no judges reading it and then making a decision about what should happen in your life and seeing all of the things that happened to you that you've been asked to share with a psychologist, right? And so things like abuse and trauma that just have occurred, and they're coming in front of you kind of naked, and so it gives you a perspective of how people process that in the courtroom, knowing that all these things about them. They know nothing about your life and your flaws and things that have happened to you, but we do have those things, right? Everybody, no one's perfect, and that organization, We Are All Criminals, makes it clear that, but for certain privileges in life, we would all have faced more challenges. And so understanding, like Judge Starr, how that person feels when they get feedback from a judge or get feedback from a social worker is crucial to us being able to be credible when we talk to people and ask them to do things or order them to do things, I guess.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. I love the reflections, and that's only something that can be provided by you judges who have been directly involved, and so I really appreciate those insights. And for the last question, for those who are interested in doing or starting the kind of work that you take part in, I would love to know what it takes to prepare, take action, or any expert tricks you're willing to share for those who are aspiring to get involved in such work.
One thing I would just say off the bat is um, it's really a commitment. We all really try to commit to be there every single Wednesday, and if and form these relationships because people are depending on us. If you want to do something like this, you have to be prepared for the commitment that's required.
I agree. And I think that, the thing the three of us sort of hold fast to is that like a lot of people have broken promises with these women, right? And we're never going to be that person. And so to Judge Mitchell's point, it's a big time commitment. I also don't know, and I'd be curious to hear what my colleagues think, but I don't believe we could do this without particularly the county attorney who joins us and the public defender who joins us, because so often they just really want legal advice, right? They want us to tell them what to do in their cases. They want to really drill down to their very specific situation, which of course presents some serious ethical risks for us. And so it's to do a warm handoff and say, Emma can help you talk that through or help you find some resources, or if you've been a victim of a crime and are trying to navigate that, we have a prosecutor who can help you. We also have someone who works with housing in Ramsey County who can sit and all the sort of gaps that we have been filled in by these amazing women collaborators who kind of help us get resources. I just think three random judges who wanted to do something like this, it's difficult to staff up unless you have kind of a community of support around you.
Which we didn't have in the
Right.
beginning.
100%. Right.
But now we do, and I don't see how we could do it without that. We also have the support of probation because our director, Monica Long, she has embraced the idea of restorative practices.
Right. And I think you have to have like a stubborn belief that being a judge is more than putting on a robe and sitting on a bench, and that we cannot be judges who truly understand the people who come before us if we don't understand the people who come before us. And that there's a lot to be gained by being in the community. You have to have that belief, not that we teach the community anything, but that the community is constantly teaching us and asking us to be lifelong learners.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and experiences. I'm sure many of those tuning in learn so much about what it takes to make a change in your community and take that big step forward. So thank you all so much. And with that, as a member of the Berkeley Judicial Institute, I want to thank you all, Judge Grewing, Judge Starr, and Judge Mitchell, so much for your amazing insights on the Women's Group Project.